38 tons of steel, screaming, and then the wet, sickening thud of the earth giving way. It wasn't just a landing, it was a billion-pound suicide. How did the world's most sophisticated empire, armed with the fury of 1,000 factories, manage to bury its entire future in a few inches of French silt? Why did the finest strategic minds in London surrender to the mystery of a common tide? But history got it wrong. While the generals were blinded by their own shadows, the only eyes that could see the truth belonged to a woman holding a child's sun-drenched holiday postcard in a dusty basement. They laughed at her until the sand began to swallow their armies. Why did the British Empire ignore the only tactic that could save them? The answer wasn't in the classified vaults, but in the hands of the forgotten. The date is May 17th, 1942. Deep within the stone-cold heart of Whitehall, London, the air is thick. Not with the scent of victory, but with the stale haze of cigarette smoke and the heavy, suffocating weight of dread. High-ranking Allied planners sit hunched over massive oak tables, their faces illuminated by the flickering yellow glow of lamps that haven't been turned off in days. They are staring at maps of Normandy. Yet they might as well be staring into a void. These maps are ghosts. They are relics of a pre-war world, hand-drawn sketches from the 1920s and early 30s that are hopelessly out of date. They show the locations of seaside hotels and fishing villages as they were in a time of peace, utterly silent about the secrets the shore now keeps. The coastline of France has become a black hole in the heart of the Allied intelligence machine. To launch the greatest amphibious assault in the history of human warfare, these men need more than just courage. They need the truth of the earth itself. They are haunted by a singular, terrifying mechanical reality, a fatal flaw in the very machines built to liberate a continent. The Churchill tank is a 38-ton predator. It is a beast of iron and rivets, designed to crush everything in its path. But when it hits the shore, the physics are brutal and unforgiving. Think of it like a heavy boot stepping onto a layer of wet flour. If the tracks don't find solid clay beneath the surface, the machine's own power becomes its undoing. The tracks spin, but instead of moving forward, they act like massive industrial shovels, digging a hole faster than the driver can react. Within seconds, the tank bellies out, its heavy underside resting on the muck while the tracks churn helplessly in the air. This is the deadly gap. The planners know the input, land the tanks and provide cover for the infantry. They know the output they desire, a breakthrough of the Atlantic Wall. But the black box of the Normandy sand threatens to turn their strategy into a massacre. A stalled tank isn't a shield, it's a static target. It becomes a steel coffin for 5 men, sitting motionless in the surf, while German 88mm guns find their range. The paradox is paralyzing the high command. To fly reconnaissance planes low enough to actually see the texture of the shoreline is to scream their intentions to the German high command. To look too closely is to tell Hitler exactly where the blow will fall. And so, the British Empire, with all its fire, its fury, and its millions of tons of shipping, stands on the edge of a continental cliff, effectively blind. They are preparing to drop a generation of young men onto a surface they cannot even define. The room in Whitehall is a masterpiece of organized panic. Telephones ring with a frantic, metallic urgency. Messengers sprint down echoing marble corridors. But at the center of the storm, the blind giants remain frozen. They are obsessed with the big picture, the troop movements, the fuel logistics, the political optics. They are looking at the horizon, ignoring the ground beneath their feet. In the far corner of the map room, away from the heavy brass and the polished metals, a young clerk named Mary shifts a stack of dusty folders. Her fingers are stained with blue ink, and her eyes are red from lack of sleep. She is one of the invisibles, a woman brought in to file the papers the men don't have time for. As she straightens a set of coastal charts from 1934, she notices something, a discrepancy. A tiny handwritten note on a French geological survey that contradicts the brigadier's grand vision for the landing zones. She clears her throat. The sound is small, fragile against the clinking of whiskey glasses and the low masculine rumble of strategic debate. The charts from the mid-30s show a shelf of soft peat and shifting silt here, sir, she says softly, her finger trembling as she points to a stretch of coastline the general has labeled prime landing ground. The brigadier doesn't even turn around. He doesn't look at the chart, and he certainly doesn't look at her. He is a man who measures the world in divisions and firepower, not in the composition of mud. He takes a long draw from his cigar, the tip glowing like a warning light in the dim room. The map says it is a beach, young lady, he rumbles, his voice dripping with a casual, devastating dismissal. And on a beach, there is sand. Sand is sand. The German steel is our concern, not the French mud. We have the factories of the Midlands and the fire of the Royal Navy behind us. The ground will obey us because it must. It is the crystallized arrogance of a system that believes its own rank can dictate the laws of nature. He treats the landscape as a submissive stage for his drama, not a living, shifting enemy. He prioritizes the manual over the reality of the earth. In his mind, the sheer weight of British resolve will surely overcome a few inches of soft soil. But while the brigadier toasts to his perfect maps, he has fatally underestimated the true master of this theater. The Atlantic Ocean respects no rank, and the ancient geology of the Normandy coast is preparing to punish his pride. The hidden silt, the ghost in the machine of the natural world, is already waiting. It doesn't care about the bravery of the crews or the quality of the armor. It is a silent, microscopic master, ready to unzip the hulls of the landing craft and swallow the liberation of Europe whole. While the establishment screams in a panic of its own making, somewhere across the city, the silence is already being broken. In a quiet, drafty office in Oxford, far from the cigars and the whiskey, the first of the postcards is being laid out on a table. It is a photo of a family on holiday in 1937. A little boy is building a sandcastle, unaware that the height of his small shovel shadow is about to become the most important piece of intelligence in the history of the world. The giants are blind, but the underdogs are starting to see. October 12th, 1943. While the grand halls of Whitehall remain choked with the fumes of expensive tobacco and the weight of impossible decisions, the real war is moving to a dusty basement in Oxford. There are no maps here, at least not yet. There are only millions of pieces of paper, the discarded fragments of civilian life. The silence of this subterranean office is broken not by the bark of orders, but by the rhythmic rustle of "wish you were here" postcards and the crinkle of family vacation photos. This is the result of a cryptic, almost desperate BBC appeal. A call to the British public to send in their memories of the French coast. The system had reached a dead end. Its reconnaissance planes were too high, its spies too few, and its generals too proud. And so, it turned to the one thing it usually ignores: the collective memory of its people. A team of women and overlooked specialists moves through these stacks like forensic investigators at a crime scene. To the generals, these are just pictures of children playing in the surf. To the women in the basement, they are the mathematical blueprints for liberation. They are performing a miracle of forensic cartography. While the military experts look at the coastline and see a strategic obstacle, these invisible agents see a physical reality because they aren't looking for enemy bunkers. They are looking for the truth of the ground. Among them is a young woman, her eyes strained by the constant use of a magnifying glass. She holds a snapshot of a family standing on a wooden pier in 1937. It's a bright, breezy day in the photograph. The father is laughing, but she isn't looking at his face. She is looking at the waterline on the pier support beams. This is the cognitive bridge. While the experts see complexity, she sees a pattern. Because she spent her youth on these very shores, she understands the language of the tide. She knows that the way the water marks the wood reveals the exact depth of the channel at high tide. She knows that the specific shade of a blurred background isn't a photographic error. It's a type of seaweed that only grows on firm, rocky shelves. She is building a map from shadows. By measuring the height of a child in a sun-drenched photo and comparing it to the angle of the shadow cast by a nearby rock, they are calculating gradients and soil density with a terrifying, quiet accuracy. They are translating sun-drenched memories into topographic data. In this room, the ghost in the machine is the human element that the establishment tried to automate and ignore. The underdogs are finding the solution not in the classified vaults, but in the ordinary lives of the people. While the high command screams for more satellites, or the 1940s equivalent, high altitude sweeps the women in the basement are already holding the answer. But the danger is escalating, and the system's arrogance is about to meet the hammer of reality. In Berlin, the German High Command looks at the Atlantic Wall and feels a sense of absolute, untouchable security. They have poured millions of tons of concrete into the cliffs of Normandy. They believe their Fortress Europe is an impenetrable masterpiece of engineering, because their manuals say no landing craft could possibly navigate the hidden reefs and treacherous shallows without being torn apart. They treat the English Channel as an impassable moat, laughing at the idea of an Allied invasion. They believe the silence from the British intelligence services is a sign of submission. But they have fatally underestimated their opponent. It isn't silence, it is the focused hush of 10 million memories being distilled into a single, lethal truth. The boss of this conflict, the very geography of France, is being mapped by grandmothers and secretaries, preparing a path through the impenetrable wall that the German engineers thought was their greatest shield. The technical reality of the landing is a nightmare of physics. To get a Higgins boat, a flat-bottom plywood box filled with 30 men close enough to the shore, You have to account for the hydrostatic trap. If the water is too shallow, the boat grinds to a halt 100 yards out, forcing the men to jump into neck-deep water while carrying 60 pounds of gear. If they jump, they drown. It's a simple, brutal equation. Weight plus water. Death. To solve this, the women in the basement develop a visual ruler. By analyzing the candle curl of the waves in a 1938 holiday snapshot, they can determine the slope of the underwater sand. A tighter curl means a steeper drop. A long, slow roll means a shallow, deadly shelf. It is the ultimate black box translation. The input is a child's laughter in a photo. The output is a precise landing coordinate, where the water is exactly 42 inches deep, deep enough for the boat, shallow enough for the man. Yet, even as the maps begin to take shape, even as the invisible team uncovers the firm clay paths that can support the 38-ton Churchill tanks, the friction remains. A colonel from intelligence visits the Oxford office. He walks through the rows of women, his boots clicking loudly on the wooden floor, looking at the piles of postcards with a mixture of pity and contempt. He stops at a table where a cartographer is meticulously tracing the line of a hidden sandbar found in a "Wish You Were Here" card. "You're building an invasion on the back of souvenirs," he says, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's a charming hobby, but the real planning is happening in Whitehall with the heavy lift surveys. Don't get too attached to your little sketches. When the shells start flying, no one is going to care about a vacation photo from 1937. It is the recurring echo of the era. They claimed the disaster was impossible because the manual said so." He values the weight of the paper more than the truth of the ink. He cannot see that while his heavy lift surveys are providing a blurry, distant lie, the women in the dust are providing a sharp, intimate truth. The underdog doesn't argue. She simply waits until he leaves, then returns to her magnifying glass. She knows something the colonel doesn't. She knows that the firm ground she just found, the one path that isn't soft peat, is the only thing that will keep those Churchill tanks from becoming tombs. The chaos of the disaster is already being averted in the shadows. While the system screams in panic, she is holding the silence that will save them. But as the date for the invasion draws near, a new shadow falls over the basement. The information is perfect, but the timing is not. The tides are shifting. The boss is changing the rules of the game once again, and the massive, slow-moving system is about to find out just how little it actually knows about the ground it intends to conquer. June 6th, 1944. Dawn is a bruised, purple smear on the horizon of the English Channel. The air isn't just cold, it is thick with the metallic tang of salt and the nauseating heavy scent of diesel fuel. 4,000 ships are churning the gray water into a frenzy. Among them, the Higgins boats, small, vulnerable plywood shells, are pitching violently in the swells. Inside, 30 men huddle together, shoulder to shoulder. They are not looking at the horizon. They are looking at the floor of the boat, listening to the rhythmic, terrifying clack, clack, clack of German machine gun fire hitting the outer hull. But as the ramps fall, as the world explodes into a chaotic symphony of screaming steel and fountains of wet sand, something miraculous happens. In the sectors where the blind giants dictated the strategy, there is disaster. But where the maps from the basement were used, there is a quiet, deadly precision. The 38-ton Churchill tanks roar out of the surf. The drivers are terrified, waiting for that sickening downward lurch into the silt. But it never comes. The tracks bite into the earth and find resistance. They find the firm clay that a mother in Oxford identified from the way a child's footprints looked in a 1937 photo. While the world sees the valor of the charge, the soldiers are stepping onto ground that has already been felt and measured by invisible hands. Every hidden reef that doesn't tear a hull, every tank that finds traction instead of a grave, is a victory for the people the system chose to ignore. The time freeze is here. Imagine a young corporal jumping into the water. He expects to drown in a 10-foot hole, but his boots hit solid ground exactly 42 inches down. He looks at the beach and sees a jagged row of hedgehog obstacles. They are exactly where the vacation photos said they would be. He doesn't know about the basement. He doesn't know about the magnifying glasses or the ink-stained fingers. He only knows that for some reason, the world makes sense. The invasion succeeds, not just through the fire of the guns, but through the meticulous, quiet ink of women who would never see the front lines. But as the smoke begins to clear and the tide of history turns toward victory, the bitter aftertaste begins to settle. When the sun sets on a liberated Europe, the maps are folded. The massive intelligence machine begins to dismantle itself. The generals stand before the cameras, their chests heavy with medals, their names etched into the permanent record of human triumph. They speak of superior strategy and industrial might. And the women, the cartographers, the families who sent in their most precious memories, they are filed away. The postcards, the child at the pier, the father on the beach, the sun-drenched days of 1937 are returned to attics in brown envelopes. The names of the female cartographers are moved from active files to gray, metal cabinets in the basement of history. The system, having used their brilliance to survive its own hubris, reverts to its default setting: silence. The very individuals who prevented a massacre are told to return to their proper place, to the secretarial pools and the quiet domesticity of a world that no longer needs their forensic eyes. It is a cruel, systemic theft of credit. We celebrate the big giants who led the charge, but we have forgotten the architects of freedom who drew the map. Do we see this same hubris in our society today? We live in an age of big data, where algorithms and high-level experts claim to understand the world perfectly from 30,000 feet. We trust the manual and the system while ignoring the people on the ground, the outsiders, the underdogs, and the invisibles who actually see the texture of the reality we are walking on. We are still a world governed by blind giants, and we are still being saved by the people they refuse to acknowledge. The lesson of the Normandy postcards isn't just about war, it's about the cost of arrogance. It's a reminder that the most powerful weapon against any system's failure isn't more steel. It's the human spirit's ability to see what the powerful choose to overlook. History may have forgotten their names, but the ground they mapped remains firm beneath our feet. We owe our peace to a group of people who won a war, one snapshot at a time, and then stepped back into the shadows, leaving us the map to a better world. If you believe that stories like these deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing, like. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.